gun to your head today, Michelle. You're the guy in charge of the offensive line and who's playing where. What are you doing? Are you going to find somebody, or are you?
I'm quitting my job.
Okay. Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, July the 10th. I'm your host, Easton, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined, as always, by producer JT. JT, how are you? Happy Monday.
How's it going? Happy Monday. We are so close and yet so far. I didn't know this.
Closer.
I didn't
more
know
close
this,
than far, I think.
Apparently this Wednesday is the deadest day in the sports calendar year, like in the year. Because
you have
literally
no major sport doing anything.
Yeah, because tonight when this is uploaded, you have the home run derby, and then Tuesday is the All-Star game. But then like Wednesday, there's no baseball or anything. They're still on a break, which I guess
football.
Yeah, done. I guess it's not true anymore because they have summer league stuff now. So like there's summer league basketball, but like it truly is just like the deadest day of like the year for sports. So like
that's a good point.
We're about to get over the hump.
Yeah, it's just summer league, and then I don't know, maybe an MLS game in there somewhere. I'm not. Do they play Wednesday nights? I don't know.
But yeah, I think Wimbledon's going on right now, but who cares about tennis?
True. Yeah, some people apparently. Anyways, today, sorry, tennis fans. Today we've got an awesome one, and we're recording the intro to this after we've done the episode. I can say with confidence and experience, because we've already done the whole thing. This is a fantastic one. This is a long one. You're going to love it, though, because it is the ultimate. I think it's the ultimate off-season primer. We're going to find our true north, reset on each position group on the Titans team. Felt like it'd be a great time, early July. Let's reset and identify as we go into training camp, as we go into the preseason, the beginning of the season. What are the biggest questions we're trying to answer for this team at each position group? So we've got an awesome guest on today, Michelle Knezovic. You're going to know her if you follow the Titans at all. She was with 102.5 forever until just recently. She is now down in New Orleans, but obviously still knows everything there is to know about the Titans. Spent OTAs this year getting to know her, hanging out with her. She's fantastic and said, got to have you on the show. She said, I would love to. So we have her on today, and her and I are going to go back and forth offering by position group our biggest question or questions as we enter training camp that we're looking to have answered, hopefully sooner than later, by the Titans, and some reasons for positivity, some reasons for concern. I think it's really, really good conversation. JT, what do you think? You're the unbiased party here. Was it worth listening to?
I think so.
Okay,
I think it's so much worth listening. I'm going to go listen to it again when I edit this.
That's
how much I think.
To pay you for saying that later. That is great company man work right there. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Michelle Knezovic on what the biggest questions are for the Titans in 2023. All right, let's welcome in our guest this week, Michelle Knezovic, formerly of 102.5 here in Nashville. So if you're a Titans fan, you're definitely familiar with her work. She is a sports media entertainment journalist extraordinaire. She's down in New Orleans now, but she, of course, still knows all about the Titans and is kind enough to join us today for a fun little thought experiment. So, Michelle, how are you? How was your move, and how are you doing in New Orleans?
Guys, I'm doing great. I will say moving is never glamorous. I tell myself,
and you would know.
Every
I've
time.
seen that you've moved like 170 times in the last 10 weeks or something. What's going on?
I've moved. It's bizarre. I mean, I think 11 times in the last 5 years, which, every time I say, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to pay for the movers. And then it comes around. I think, I can do it. And then
I can do this. Right.
Listen, in the heat of Louisiana in the summer, this definitely was the most mentally tough move, but we're here, we're done, big check mark off the list. But a lot of things have happened since I left Nashville with the Titans,
Yeah, no kidding. And we're officially, I think, in that period of the year. We're starting to ramp up. You can see the light at the end of the summer tunnel. So I'm excited to talk about today's topic. We're basically just going to go position group by position group and try to narrow down, hone in on the biggest question or maybe couple of questions we have about each unit on this Titans team. And as we enter training camp, I think it's good to just take inventory of where the different parts of this team are, what questions we have remaining. And really, I think this is going to help us narrow down what we're looking for once training camp does roll around. And then, maybe come November, once we have some of these answers, we'll have you back on and we can revisit all of this. So
Yeah.
I know that you have predetermined some questions. I've predetermined some questions. Are we ready to just dive right in?
Yeah, we're ready. I mean, you posed the topic
Okay.
to me, and I thought no better way to kind of kick off the offseason than just taking a look at it, because this team's in a weird spot right now. No surprise.
Yes. No shortage of questions. I mean, for a full episode assignment, this one came very easy. I had a harder time narrowing down the questions than coming up with questions. So let's start at the top here. How about the quarterback position? What was your biggest question or questions you had about this unit heading into 2023?
I mean, I think the biggest one is, what is Will Levis, right? We saw some things in OTAs. We saw some things and it's not so the question of what is Will Levis to be the starting quarterback, because for me, it's clear Ryan Tannehill is the starting quarterback. That's not the question. My question is, what is he? Because you're looking at him, you realize the investment that you put in him. And if he can't be your backup, if he can't beat Malik Willis out for your backup position in training camp and show that he's been able to make that jump and been able to take all of the information and, just learning and adjusting from college to the NFL to become that backup quarterback, I mean, I think that's a problem, because this is the guy that you eventually want to be able to lead your team. I know people say, hey, well, he wasn't a first round pick. He was a second round pick. That's great. You got great value out of that pick, because he was a guy who was projected to go into the first round. I think that was probably one of the biggest surprises to me. And honestly, recent draft history, to see him drop all the way out of the first round. So, you look at Will Levis. I don't have questions about Ryan Tannehill. We know what Ryan Tannehill is. I don't have too many questions about Malik Willis, because I think it's pretty clear that by drafting Will Levis, they realized he is not going to be their guy of the future. So I think when you look at that room, the biggest question is, do you see enough from Will Levis that he can confidently be your backup this year and eventually turn into your starter in 2024?
No, I completely agree. I think that's the obvious one, right? That has to be at the top of the list. This is going to be a common theme, you'll realize quickly as we go through this with me, but I had a hard time narrowing it down to just one question. I feel like these two go hand in hand, though. The question that I came up with along the lines of Will Levis is, in what scenario, or maybe is there a scenario in which he takes the reins this season? And I know that I think we agree that it's an outlier scenario for sure. But is there something that could happen, or some series of things that could happen to lead to the Titans making that pivot earlier than expected? Obviously, I think the easiest one is he miraculously just looks like this next up guy in practice, and suddenly, it's like Mahomes in his rookie season behind Alex Smith. The team is like, oh yeah, we know we've got something here. Like, they're fully aware. Even in that scenario, I still think that they probably wait. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I really only see the way that they potentially hand him the reins this year are if things are a disaster out of the gate and early, because that's really the reason why you roll with Tannehill this year. Obviously, he's the better quarterback. There's no doubt about that for many of us that have been there to see OTAs even and compare the two. But if you're not competing for something this year, then there's really no reason to continue to roll Tannehill out there, besides maybe trying to justify the paycheck that you're giving him. So do you think that there's a doomsday scenario in which this team is, 1-5, coming back from London? They're headed into their week 7 bye. And if that is the situation, there certainly will be a lot of buzz in the media and with fans like, what are we playing for this year? What's going on? Are they 4 games back at the Jaguars in the division? Maybe it's time to get some live reps. Let's let Will Levis throw some live bullets out there and see what's going on, right?
Yeah, sure. No, I completely get that scenario you've thrown out there. And I think that for most fans and for most people who work in the media, not speaking for everybody, but that was really the biggest question when the schedule came out and you looked at, okay, how they're starting off the year, right? They're coming to New Orleans week 1, another team that has kind of a question mark too. They got a new quarterback in Derek Carr. They're playing in the worst division in the NFC. The AFC South is paired with the NFC South. So the Tennessee Titans have an easier schedule. They don't have a first place schedule, which they haven't had the luxury of having, that non-first place schedule the last couple of years. So I think, Easton, that's where the biggest question comes, because, we can say, what if the Titans come out and, they are 1-5 or they're 2-4, right? Heading into the bye week after London. There are a lot of questions. But I look at this team and I look at a team with Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, and Mike Vrabel, and they're not going to go 1-5. Like I do not foresee them going 1-5, and I do not foresee them, having a year where it's just a complete dumpster fire. I do think there are areas on the roster that have gotten better. I think there are areas on the roster that have gotten worse. That happens every single year, and I guess I could see him probably playing in garbage time minutes if either they're blowing somebody out or they're getting blown out, throw them out there. We saw Malik Willis out there for some specialty things last year before Ryan Tannehill got hurt. I don't see them putting Will Levis in something like that. But I guess, like you said, if it is a dumpster fire, sure, throw them out there. See what you got. You might as well find out sooner rather than later.
Well, and as I sat and thought about that scenario, and I came to the same conclusion I think you and pretty much anybody did, yes, technically that is probably what would happen, but also that there's just no way that this team starts 1-5. I think maybe more likely than that, and something that people aren't considering, is maybe by the midpoint of the season, this team is certainly not great, and it's maybe they are hitting their floor with Mike Vrabel, and they're around 500. They're 3-4, 4-5, something like that. Certainly not out of things on paper in a vacuum, but then maybe Trevor Lawrence just ascends and has that year, and the Jaguars are sitting at 7-1, 8-1, 8-0. There, every year there's a team that starts out, maybe not sustains it all year long. There's always a team that starts 8-0, 7-0, 8-0, 9-0,
and they're just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. The Cardinals a couple of years ago as well, hair on fire teams. That may raise some questions if the Titans team isn't necessarily horrible, but they still find themselves by the midpoint of the season 4 or 5 games back. I still think fans would raise that question of, okay, what are we playing for here? Are we really desperate to get to? Yeah, this team's not horrible, so that isn't justification for Will Levis. But if this team gets to 8-9, they don't win the division, and in a stacked AFC, that's not good enough to get into the playoffs.
Sure. Or if mathematically they're knocked out of the playoffs and they still have 2 games left or something like that. So if you're mathematically knocked out, or for instance, this past year, Thursday Night Football, we saw a lot of guys, Derrick Henry, a lot of the starters sitting out.
You can name the guys who played easier than you can name the guys that didn't play.
Yeah, I'm who did it? Just because they knew they had a shot week 18 to get the division. I could see something like that happen, right? He's not Mike Vrabel knows what it's like to be a player, and you get to the end of the season, you're not making the playoffs. He knows that maybe Ryan Tannehill's not going to be this quarterback next year. You're not going to risk a starter getting hurt, in the last year of their deal or something like that, and then lose maybe an opportunity to go play somewhere else when you're not really playing for anything at the end of the year.
So here's the other question I couldn't get out of my head, and I think it's secondary, but it certainly bears repeating. And a month from now, this question will either seem really prescient or really dumb. But based on how OTAs went, and I know that you were there, you saw what everybody else saw, and you're a part of the rumblings that have been going on around Malik Willis. Certainly, it's not shocking. Players tend to get better year to year, so it shouldn't be a shock to anybody that he looks improved in the limited time that we've seen him so far this year. But if he comes to camp in August, there's this little, it's a small rumble. But you've heard the whispers of hey, Malik Willis kind of looked better than Will Levis in OTAs. That's not shocking. One's a rookie, one's a second-year player. But if that continues, or maybe that gap widens even in August, and Malik continues to impress and improve, what does this team do about that? Obviously, they have the option to keep all 3 guys. And me personally, I think that's the highest likelihood even today. I'd say that they're more likely to keep all 3 than not. Because none of these guys, certainly not Tannehill, but none of the younger guys are players I think you can put safely on the practice squad without them getting scalped by some other team. They're just too valuable. There's too much potential. Do you think he could make things interesting in August if he continues to impress folks.
Well, the first thing I want to touch on is, you mentioned Easton, right? People are like, oh, goodness, Malik looks better. He looks better than Will Levis.
Right.
He should.
Yeah,
he
exactly.
Should
that is the point,
like,
yes.
If he doesn't look better than Will Levis, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That is the bigger problem
yes.
in this. Will Levis quite literally was at the combine, finished a college season, is getting thrown into rookie mini stuff. I mean, Malik Willis absolutely should look leaps and bounds better than, Will Levis and I don't think he looked leaps and bounds better than him. I think, yes, he looked better. He looked more comfortable. He's not trying to have to learn all this stuff. And he's had an entire off season with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, because I think it was pretty clear that, at the locker clean out day, it was clear that Malik Willis had seen some of the things on social media, had heard, the way that fans viewed him, looked at him, when he kind of got out there and he could not execute being the starting quarterback when they went and got Josh Dobbs, because Malik could not run the offense. So yeah, he's got a chip on his shoulder. I'm sure he worked really hard. I talked to his individual quarterback coach, and
Sean McAvoy. We love Sean. Yeah.
Asked him to come on. He said he'd rather talk, after we see some things from Malik in training camp and things like that, but that he was throwing, working every day. That's great. That's the type of player you want. That's a Mike Vrabel player. Of course, this is their job. This is their full-time job to play in the NFL. If the gap widens when you get into training camp, I think that kind of goes back to my original question on this quarterback group. You don't want that to happen. I understand Will Levis was a rookie coming into minicamp, but once training camp gets rolled in, they've been there for a couple of months now. You're getting adjusted to the city.
New expectations.
Everybody's got pads on. I mean, it is go time, because the season will be here sooner than we know it. So yeah, if the gap widens, that's concerning, because you just used a second round draft pick and moved up to go and get Will Levis. But I think, to your point, Easton, they're not going to put him on the practice squad because some other team would easily snatch him up. I think they would just keep 3 quarterbacks on their roster. And I think that, you spend more time with developing him during the season, and you make sure that Charles London and him, I understand that Tannehill is your starter, but you make sure that they're spending a lot of time and he's doing a lot of work outside of it, because you invested a lot for him to be your starting quarterback. And it's concerning if you find out that earlier than later.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, let's move on. Michelle, running backs. What is the biggest question you have for this team's running back room going into 2023?
Well, there are a lot of ways you could go with this one. First question, which is not my actual question, is Hassan Haskins going to be on the team? I was actually on
That's the timely question. Yeah.
Football and Other F Words just a little over a week ago when the news broke regarding his arrest. I think that is the first just question of, is he going to be on this roster? Because you picked him, last year, and we thought, okay, could this be Derrick Henry's, after Derrick Henry, right? Life after Derrick Henry. Could it be him? And he was a special teams role, and very concerning, very, very concerning, and a character issue. And that is not something that we usually see with players, especially under Mike Vrabel. So that's my small question. And I would say my biggest question is, as I'm sitting here in New Orleans, what type of threat is Tajay Spears going to be on this offense? Because although when he was drafted, there was a lot of negative chatter surrounding, this guy doesn't have an ACL, what's going on? People decided not to look at what he actually has done on the field.
It was
what he
peak
did
internet,
in the Cotton
man.
Bowl.
It was peak internet.
I mean, what he did in the Cotton Bowl, people didn't know who this guy was. And the reality is, Tajay Spears would have been probably a second-round draft pick if it weren't for his medicals.
Yep.
I understand they're scary. I understand Tennessee Titans fans don't want to hear that because of the injury bug that this team has had the last 2
PTSD,
seasons.
Sure,
I get it. But eventually, that's got to stop. I mean, this is the NFL. People get hurt. People get injured. Eventually, I hope it's this year. Oh, goodness. I hope it's this year, because if it's not, we'll never hear the end of it, Easton.
Honestly, I'm tired of talking about it more than anything. Like that's what I'm hoping for.
I hate saying if he's healthy, because we get it. It's the NFL.
Right.
Everybody's better if they're healthy. But Tajay Spears, I mean, I think it was clear in minicamp and in OTAs that, whether it be Derrick Henry, who had his biggest receiving year last year, Tajay Spears knowing the type of player that he was at Tulane, and just hearing from Ryan Tannehill and Tim Kelly about how this offense is getting faster and it's getting, more tiered, more dynamic, spreading it out. I think that Tajay Spears could be a really, really interesting, almost secret weapon for this Tennessee Titans team this year. And I'd love to see, him and Derrick Henry both out there. And then of course, I'm gonna throw it out there. Does Derrick Henry break 10,000 this year? I mean, he's right there. And everybody's saying he's taken a step back. I will go on your podcast and say, I feel confident in him rushing for at least 1,500 yards this year.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think there's some signs of aging, but you know what else took a big old step back the last 2 years? The guys he was running behind. That
quite
is
literally,
a part of that.
I mean, the amount of times he got hit before he even had forward momentum. I mean, it's
who isn't taking a step back in that situation is, I suppose, the question. No, I agree completely. And my question was also centered around Spears, basically the same, but a slight difference in my question. What I wanted to narrow down, or try to narrow down, was, will they play Spears as a true complement to Henry, or will they show signs of grooming him for the future? And what I mean by that is there are two conflicting ideas with this team when it comes to Spears that one has to win out. One is that on paper, this team notorious for slow playing rookies, right? We know that they like to take their time with guys. They like to give guys time to acclimate and not give them too much on their plate, to a fault, really, to the point of people being like, let's get this guy some more run. Let's take the training wheels off. They also, with the running back position, in terms of the bell cow, which has been an identity of the team for as long as I've been alive, like they are a running ground and pound team. They love to have a bell cow guy. They've never really been a true by committee team in the running game. When we saw Derrick Henry drafted and he comes in and is the second guy to DeMarco Murray, there's all this talk about how, like, wow, Derrick Henry through his first 2 seasons, like, he only had 6 touches, like, more than that, but
which is crazy considering what he's done and where he is about to break 10,000 yards when he barely played his first 2 seasons.
Right. But my point in bringing that up really is that they did really not play. They were grooming him to be that next guy, and they were keeping as much tread on the tires as possible. Sure. Then on the other hand, what we've seen at OTAs, which we can speak sparingly on, Michelle, the way that they're utilizing Spears is really exciting and versatile and multiple and kind of positionless at times and very frequent, like a ton. And I think part of that is maybe by necessity, just, of the weapons you have, he is one of the best already. But those two ideas of what we've seen makes you really excited about what he could do this year. And he may be the perfect true complement that they really just give him some leash to go and be that guy opposite Henry and be an awesome thunder lightning combination. But at the same time, historically, we may need to pump the brakes on that. And if they are truly grooming him to be the next guy, like they think once Henry is done this year, next year, whenever, he's going to be our bell cow, maybe we slow play it a little bit and groom him for the future. I'm not sure which one of those two is going to be.
Well, and I understand what you're saying there. I think more so, when I look at this team and how it's constructed, and specifically the running back group, when you look at Hassan Haskins, he's more of a Derrick Henry type bell cow running back. That's not what Tajay Spears is.
No.
When they drafted Tajay Spears, and I understand looking at history, Tajay Spears isn't that type of player, right? And I think they got a new GM now, right? They have a new vision. They want to get faster. They want to get more explosive. They want to become more modern. And they have a modern offense. I think that's like they run the same offense as, San Francisco, even the Chiefs to some degree, but they have Patrick Mahomes. So of course you're going to do different things. But, Tajay Spears, I believe is the type of guy who could be a running back I mean, and these are the biggest names, of course, but a guy like a Christian McCaffrey or a Saquon Barkley, a guy who is valued maybe a little bit more in this league because he's involved so much in the receiving game. But I mean, the ironic thing is, and maybe people don't choose to acknowledge it, but Derrick Henry had his biggest year in his career receiving last year.
Yep.
And, combined was just under 2,000 yards. So I don't think Tajay Spears, I think Hassan Haskins was more of kind of training him to eventually be that bell cow guy,
Right.
just run.
Bruiser between the tackles. Yep.
And even Mike Vrabel, in one of his press conferences, I think it was during minicamp or something, he said Hassan Haskins isn't a guy really that you notice that much during OTAs or minicamps without pads on. He said, but when that guy's got pads on, you notice him. You notice him as a running back and that type of guy. And I mean, Easton, the biggest question right now is he going to be off the team?
I think the answer is eventually, but I think that the other answer may be not nearly as soon as people think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. But you have Julius Chestnut, who has been, he was effective last year. I think he was more effective than Hassan Haskins when he got.
And Jonathan Ward, who impressed a number of folks.
Jonathan Ward, yeah. So that room's going to be interesting. I'll throw out one more big question just because, the running back group is so prominent here in Tennessee. But will Derrick Henry take a significant step back? I don't think he will.
Me neither.
I really don't. I think the guy will still have, an incredible year, be at the top of the NFL in rushing. But I think
on paper, it has to be on the table.
It's fair to ask. Every year you get older in the NFL, closer to 30, it's fair to ask.
Well, and with running backs in particular, we know that it is rarely a steady decline and often a cliff. When that cliff comes, hard to tell. Okay, hello. Pardon us. We forgot that wide receivers exist. And by we, I mean I. Sorry to interrupt our interview with Michelle, but in post-production of this episode, I realized I had just completely blocked. Maybe it's my subconscious not wanting to talk about this wide receiver group more because it's been all we've talked about for the entire spring. But I totally forgot to bring it up with Michelle. And being the kind person she is, I'm guessing she had a question written down, was prepped and ready to do it, and then just went with my flow and I just ran right over the receiver position. But we're not going to exclude it. So JT's going to pinch it for Michelle in this little addendum to today's episode. We are going to present our top questions for the receiving position. That being said, JT, what is your biggest question for the Titans wide receiving room going into 2023?
I'm so happy to pinch hit here because, just the guy that I am on the fly, I'm more than willing to help out here. And I'm glad it's about, I'm glad it's about the wide receiver because I did tweet this out the other day. And I said, if DeAndre Hopkins does not in fact sign with the Titans, I actually don't mind Chris Moore as the wide receiver 3. Moore was sneaky productive last year in a bad Texans offense. And I think many fans are overlooking his impact he could have. And I think that is my question. What kind of impact does Chris Moore have? He is the guy they signed in free agency out of all of the bargain bin, not even worth a bargain free agents that were out there this offseason.
The free basket. The basket at the yard sale that's just labeled free, just trying to take it off their hands.
Chris Moore is like one of the more fine free agent additions. If you go back and look at this free agent group, and I think it's just because he played for the Texans. Right? Yes. I think it's because he played for the Texans, but he was sneaky productive. He was like when Brandon Cooks wasn't playing and was having his little feud with the team. Like Chris Moore stepped up in a big way, and if you
had
can
more
get
yards
him to
than any Titans receiver last year.
Yes, if you can get him to be your wide receiver 3, I think it plays into the fact that this Titans team likes what they have and isn't super. And now, of course, they're making an aggressive push at DeAndre Hopkins, but they like him because he is going to be productive, I think, in that wide receiver 3 role. And I think I got a bunch of questions that was like, you think that he's the wide receiver 3, who's the wide receiver 2, which probably is what I'm thinking your question is.
It is. Yeah.
But,
just to clarify 2 things. One, I don't think either of us want him to be do we want him to play the 3rd position, or do we think he'll be fine in the 3rd position? I think he'll be fine there.
I think he'll be fine.
In an ideal offense. I don't want it. You know what I mean? So like I'm
Yes.
with you there on Chris Moore. And yes, the other thing I need to clarify for both of us, and I'm going to speak for you, but I really don't think this is a hot take. Like the obvious question is, does Traylon Burks have his alpha year 2 breakout? Right? That's
That's another question. Yes.
we're not going to beat a dead horse. That is super vanilla talk radio. Like everybody knows that's what we're wondering. To go a step deeper than that, I'll look at who I think is going to be the wide receiver 2 when all is said and done at the end of the season, if he stays healthy. And that's Kyle Phillips. I've been on the Kyle Phillips train since they drafted him last year, since I got to see him last August at training camp, since they drafted him and he was not on my radar in the last year's draft because I wasn't as deep into the draft last year as we were this year. So I went and in post, once they drafted him, did as much research on him as possible, watched the tape, all that good stuff. And from that moment, I was hooked. I still am on the train, despite his durability concerns last year, which are and will forever, until proven otherwise, remain the number one and, in my opinion, only concern that I have with him being a productive starting wide receiver in the NFL. Obviously, it's the durability. Last year, we saw him do in game 1 what more than I was expecting him to do. Like it's like he heard all of the truthers in the media during training camp and was like, let me not let you down. And in game 1 just went thermonuclear and was the leading receiver in thermonuclear. Not really, but like in terms of the leading receivers on the team, he was the number one guy. He was the reason almost single-handedly, he and Ryan Tannehill playing toss and catch on the last drive of the game, hosting the Giants here in Nashville, why Randy Bullock has a chance where he should have won the game for them at the end of regulation. It was on that play that he fell, hurt his shoulder on the diving catch out of bounds, and he was never the same after that. Shoulder injury hampered his ability to contribute in the next couple of weeks. He gets some more injuries, deals with some soft tissue hamstring issues later on in the season. Just a number of nagging little 5-6 week injuries that stacked on top of each other. I remember coming off of our Thanksgiving episode, we're talking about how like Kyle Phillips, finally, it's time for him to come back. They're bringing him off the IR, and then hamstring, pulled it in practice, and then it's just bye-bye Kyle Phillips for the rest of the year. New year, fresh slate. He's put on some weight, not to get into a long conversation that has been a years-long debate on Twitter about whether or not receivers have to or do not have to be a certain weight to be durable in the NFL, but it certainly does not hurt. And I've been saying that. I mean, no one can disagree that being a little bit bulkier, and bigger allows for a little bit more durability in that way. And so that's at least what he has indicated he's given a shot this year, just to see if that helps. I think also just whether he's healthy or unhealthy, having some size as a receiver is helpful in being able to force your way open, win contested catch, win at the catch point. And all of those things, I think, are going to play into his hands in a positive way this year. I think that, again, if he's healthy, he will be incredibly productive. He may be as productive as Traylon Burks most weeks, just in terms of the number of catches, because what did we see when Ryan Tannehill came into this offense in 2019? They're rocking with Adam Humphries, the slot machine, and he is a constant for Ryan Tannehill in that season because he is there for the dump off. You don't have to have a great offensive line to utilize your slot receiver heavily and often, and easily and often, rather. And so I think that is the reason why I'm expecting, again, massive asterisk, JT. Gotta stay healthy. But if he is not even perfectly healthy, but just mostly healthy this year, I think that he's going to be their guy. And so that's my question. Is he the wide receiver 2 that I think that he can be? What say you?
I also on the Kyle Phillips train. It's just the biggest if is that I don't doubt that he can be the wide receiver 2, which kind of, as we talk about, is kind of the wide receiver 3 on this team. Like he's going to be second or third in targets. The big if is if he can stay healthy. If he does, I don't have any question about it, but it's just a big if, and we'll have to see.
Nope, me neither. All right. Pardon this interruption, this wide receiver interruption. We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming. All right, Michelle, the tight end position. I'm going to say another position. They're pretty much all this way. Some serious question marks. We don't quite know, and not necessarily in a bad way, just there's so much change. We don't know until we've seen it, right? With this tight end room, there's one thing about the tight end room I think we're all in agreement on at this point, and that is one Mr. Chigakonkwo being a stud. But what is your number one question? Maybe it is Chig related about this tight end room for 2023.
So I think the obvious question would be about Chikakonkwo. So I went a different way with my question. And it's not necessarily a question. It's more so a statement on my end. And I want to see how you feel about the statement.
Okay, I'm ready.
My statement is that a sleeper red zone guy is going to be Josh Wiley.
I like it. I mean, based on what we've seen in OTAs alone, the ability is there 100%.
He's huge. First off, he's huge. You know, you look at how tall he is on paper. I don't have his height and weight in front of me right now, but that guy is a big dude. Like, I'm talking like Gronk big type of dude out there. You look at his range and his wingspan and his oh my goodness, I'm having a brain fart right now.
Frame?
Yes, frame.
Yeah.
And
6'6", 250, Josh Wiley.
Yeah, 6'6", 250. I knew he was like 6'5", 6'6", or something like that.
Big old fella.
But I mean, when you talk about like the range and like when he's going over to catch something, like his arm length, like it really is something that I don't think a lot of people have been talking about it. I get it. He's still a rookie. He's still got a lot to prove. But when you look at his size and you look at some of the things that he's been doing in OTAs and in minicamp, I think that he is going to be just as involved as, you know, a Tajay Spears. I truly do. You know, we talk about the blocking tight ends. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be blocking there, but I also think he's going to be a guy who is going to be maybe one of the biggest red zone targets. And I'm not saying this based on any reporting or anything like that. I'm just looking at what Ryan Tannehill has been successful in before. And when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator here, he was very successful when you had two tight ends in there. And I thought we were going to see more of it last year with Chig and Austin Hooper. It took a little bit of time for Austin Hooper to get acclimated. It took a little bit of time for Chig to kind of break down that rookie wall. But, you know, once he did, it was really promising. And now I look at, okay, Chig is the leader now in this room. Can Josh Wiley do a similar thing? And we also got to remember, too, Josh Wiley went to Cincinnati, and he was coached under Luke Fickell, who's Mike Vrabel's best friend. So when you talk about the type of guy he is, you know, he's got that inside information from Luke Fickell. And I know they're different guys, but they played at Ohio State together. And if you're best friends, you're similar. So, you know, if it worked for him there, you know that he told Vrabel, you know, this is a guy that you want. So I kind of put that in there as like a little extra nugget of why I look at this guy. And I think, you know what? I think he could be pretty effective for this team in addition to Chig.
Michelle, when JT and I covered the draft and did study on these guys, JT, what was the number one thing we thought was the defining trait of Josh Wiley, the thing that stood out most to us? Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it had to be his contested catch ability.
Thank you.
Like,
yes.
The dude was making crazy, like on all the tape. It's just like every catch was just in traffic, and he was still making these outlandish catches.
And I know Michelle can back me up on this. From what we've seen in OTAs, it tracks. He's a big contested catch guy. Do you remember at rookie minicamp, they ended the practice on that crazy kind of an errant throw by Will Levis, and he just climbs the ladder, and it's like, hello.
Well, and you talk about, you know, some of the guys he might be going up against in the secondary, you know, I mean, he's probably double their size, right? I mean, think about a guy like even Kevin Byard. You know, I know he's in shape, but like compared to Josh
God forbid
Wiley,
a linebacker,
he's got some inches on him. Yeah, a linebacker, but I mean, Josh Wiley, 6'6", over 250. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
That's the type of tight end. I mean, look at how successful some guys like that in the league have been. I think of Ravens, Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Mark Andrews. Look at what he's been in the league. We all know Gronk, you know, Travis Kelce, like these guys and the size. Kittle, there you go. His size and contested catches. That's a red zone guy. That's what I'm saying.
No, I agree. I had two questions, and one of them was, do they slow play Wiley? Same kind of thing. Like, he's a rookie. Yes. But my own answer to my question was, the element of the game I feel like you're going to see him most prevalently this year is that red zone package. And I think that what we've seen at OTAs absolutely backs that up. And just with his size and his sure hands, that contested catch ability, what is a quarterback's best friend in the trafficy, difficult to read, short field red zone? It's a big body target. And he is a big body target that you can, it's hard to miss a big fella, not a tiny window with that guy. The other question I had was, and this goes to kind of looking at the sins of the Titans past and what they're trying to do this year differently. a big talking point with the tight end position last year was this team is consistently telegraphing what they are doing based on who is on the field, right? Last year's tight end room was a bunch of guys that had no versatility, the opposite of what this team is preaching this year.
Come on, when don't throw shade at Jeff Swaim.
I will. I'll throw all the shade. Jeff Swaim is on the field last year, and the defense and the coaches and every fan in the stadium with functioning eyeballs was like, okay, here comes the run, or God forbid a pass, the rare pass. It's even worse because then, this year they're trying to focus in on the versatility element. They're trying to focus in on obviously turning over the personnel in the tight end room. They've got basically all fresh blood, but Chikakonkwo coming in.
He's still only a sophomore in the NFL.
Right, exactly. So it's practically a brand new room. You've got Josh Wiley, who's a rookie. You bring in Trayvon Wesco, who's going to be that bonus lineman, essentially. He's going to be your big bruising tight end. You're not going to see a whole lot of him in the passing game. But will this team, with the personnel that they have and with maybe the philosophical change that Tim Kelly is implementing, will they do a better job of not being so obvious about what's going on based on who's on the field?
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the biggest questions. We'll go through every position on the offense, but it's, who's play calling, right? Todd Downing, it was very clear that, he was very predictable with what he was calling.
You don't say.
I think that was, fans were screaming for it towards the middle of the season. And I thought, we look at it now and it's like, playing from Green Bay, he gets the DUI, and then he ends up getting fired at the end of the season. So it's like, okay, well, he could have probably just been fired there. They didn't end up winning a game. You fired your GM. Right. So
right.
And with Todd Downing, the predictability was the number one red flag. Right. Red flags in the relationship: predictability, predictability.
Right.
And I think right now, what you can hold on to is what Tim Kelly did in Houston, right? When he was an offensive coordinator down there, Deshaun Watson had his best year. And I'll even go back to when Davis Mills was a rookie. I understand they were still the Texans. And if you look at the record, it's not pretty. It's not, right? But I don't know what.
But if you actually watched it.
If you remember 2021, it was week 8. I think it was week 18 for the Titans to clinch the 1 seed. Davis Mills went head-to-head with Ryan Tannehill and the Titans when they became the number 1 seed.
Made that afternoon way too stressful for Titans fans. They were expecting a nice coast to the top of the conference, and it was a nightmare for a second.
Yeah, that team actually, and I think it's important to bring that up because that's the small sample size we do have of Tim Kelly being an offensive coordinator. And the fact that Mike Vrabel wanted to hire him and the Texans blocked it. They wanted to interview him for the OC job before Todd Downing. Obviously, they blocked it. They said, no, you can't. Then, that all just kind of fell down. And then Tim Kelly came over and things like that. So, you want to believe that it's not going to be as predictable. And this was the guy all along. And he didn't really have much to do with the offense last year. It was more so just evaluating okay, this is what I'm eventually going to do. And hopefully I get the job next season.
Right.
But
all that early down passing work he did for them to never pass on early downs, right?
Yeah, right. But I think one of the biggest things that gives me hope that it will be different is the fact that it is so different that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry all came, to OTAs, and Ryan Tannehill was here early and working with Treylon Burks, with Tim Kelly. And when you see that from veterans, especially Derrick Henry, who is used to doing his own training in the offseason in Texas. He goes down there. He's usually never at OTAs, but Derrick Henry will be ready. And he even said, he's like, I came here early because I knew we had a new offense. And that shows me that it's new enough where your veterans are like, okay, I got to get here and I got to be ready. So that is kind of a positive flag for Tim Kelly on my end.
All right, Michelle, we've got one last position group on the offense, and it's one that we're going to have to really try to not make an hour-long conversation because, boy, are there plenty of questions suddenly for this Titans offensive line. But what did you narrow down as the biggest question or questions? Some changing circumstances in the last 10 minutes or so, but what is your biggest question for this offensive line group going into 2023?
How big of a loss will Nicholas Petit-Frere be?
That's what I wrote too. Yeah, I mean, you can't not ask. That's the question you have to ask. What does it mean? Right.
And we talk like if you were let's go back an entire year, right? A year ago, is Dylan Radins going to be the right tackle? Is Dylan Radins? And then you go into camp, and what's the biggest question? Who's the right tackle? Now we're going.
We weren't talking about MPF. We're
going into camp again this year. Who's going to be the right tackle? Like it's the question over and over again. And Nicholas Petit-Frere beat Dylan Radins out. He had some rookie moments out there, and I think it showed a little bit more towards the end of the season. When guys have to be prepared. Week after week, you're putting your body out there. It's different than college football, and really focus on using the week to get ready for Sunday again. But I think
and as the line crumbled around him, the chinks in the armor started to show. They couldn't smooth over some of those inabilities of his, right?
Yeah, and when he had Ben Jones and Nate Davis and Taylor Lewan at the beginning of the season, things looked a lot different. And then when, like you said, it started to crumble, and Dennis Daly and Ben Jones was injured. And
Week 17, Thursday night with Dallas. It's a practice squad plus MPF, and it's like woof. Yeah.
So, and I talked about this. So stupid. Like, and the statement Nicholas Petit-Frere put out there, I'm like, come on, you are such a smart kid. Right. I mean, he's
such a bright guy.
That is the number one thing I took away the first time I ever talked to him. I said, wow, this kid is very intelligent. He's very intentional with his words. When he speaks to the media, he carries himself very well. And it's like,
and I've had some people tell me like, well, but you say that about all these guys. Like, no, there's a number of football players that I know that I would not say that about. I wouldn't say they're dumb, but I wouldn't say they're bright. This guy's bright.
So, all that work that you did in OTAs, and I understand that, they don't have pads on and things look a lot different, but, with Peter Skoronski going in there and gaining some sort of chemistry, right? I mean, he's a rookie coming in there new. You got Brunskill, who's new. You got Dillard, who's new. You got Brewer now at center, which he did play a little bit of last year, but new.
New to him.
Right? Yep. And then you have Nicholas Petit-Frere, who's actually one of the veterans because he played right tackle all year last year.
Right. The only returning element.
The only one. So what is this line going to look like? And any chemistry that they built in OTAs and minicamp, now he's gone. We talked about those first 6 games in regards to the quarterback position, how crucial those first 6 games are. So now not having him, is it going to be Jalen Duncan? Are you going to shift things around and have?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. What gun to your head today, Michelle? You're the guy in charge of the offensive line and who's playing where. What are you doing? Are you going to find somebody? Or are you?
I'm quitting my job.
Okay, 2 weeks notice. Turning it in. Right.
I kind of look at this and I think when you look at the guys they have, I think I would do Daniel Brunskill.
Bump him
you
out.
Got him because he is a veteran and he's versatile.
That was the pitch.
He was in San Francisco. You got him because he was a guy who could plug and play different positions. And because he's a veteran in the league, I would put him as your right tackle. And then I think Jordan Roos, I would put
Corey
at
Levin,
right
maybe?
Guard. Corey Levin is an option too. Or
right.
Put Corey Levin at center and shift Brewer to guard, but also Brewer has really taken this center role. And Tannehill's like he's in every meeting and he's there. And
I really don't think they want to do that. I'll be shocked if they move him off of it. Yeah.
I mean, or there's an option too. People say, Peter Skoronski played center. Would you want to move him and then try to, make him maybe try to make him your center for, be your Ben Jones, right?
Interesting.
I mean,
okay.
That could be an option. I don't foresee that happening.
No.
But I think it would probably be what I would say, Corey Levin to guard, Brunskill to tackle, just because he is a veteran and he's played multiple roles at the NFL level.
I think that's realistic. And I think ultimately the thing people have to keep in mind is there's a number of things they could do. They could bring somebody in. They could try a number of guys at that tackle position. Ultimately, the only thing that I am confident in saying on that topic is that they are going to try to go with the most minimally invasive surgery on this offensive line possible. I think that these ideas, like people on paper want to shuffle guys, let's move him here, move it. that's nice on paper and in theory, but they've been enjoying this first season in a long time of being able to not constantly shuffle guys around and actually gain some continuity and some momentum of having those 5. NPF goes and royally screws that up, and I'm sure they're jazzed about that. But I think that it's going to result in them trying to do maybe not the best possible thing in terms of the best 5 out there, but the best possible thing for this line to maintain as much integrity as possible and just get by. Because again, it's not a full year. It's just the first 6 weeks. They just have to survive it. And then I'm sure they're going to want to get back to what they'd planned on being the setup by the end of their bye week in week 7. That was my question as well. So I think we've covered that. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Let's start up front. Defensive line. I had a number of questions here, but I'm curious what you wrote down. What is your number one question for the Titans defensive line in 2023?
Does Danico Autry take a step back? Getting
interesting.
Getting Danico Autry, right? This is his third. Well, this would be his third season now with the Titans, coming from the Colts. I think one of the most underrated John Robinson moves that we don't talk a lot about. We talk about, Danico Autry, he's such a threat out there, especially when he's in tandem with Jeffrey Simmons. But, he is getting into that mid-30 range, which is concerning, especially playing the position that he does play, the defensive front. He did have knee injuries last year, on and off. He is a bigger body, when you talk about putting weight on that knee. So I think, if him and Jeffrey, and I'll say it again, are fully healthy, because we have to say it all the time, if they are fully healthy. But I think, it's a fair question to ask. Danico Autry's been playing at a very, very high level these last 2 seasons for you all. But when you get up into that mid-30 range in the NFL and you've been playing like that for so long, and we saw some injury issues last year when he had to take off a bit of time because of the knee, and we saw how big of a step back that line looked like when he had to take some time off because of the knee. You realize how different he can make that defensive front. So then I question, if he does have issues with the knee again this year, can Jeffrey Simmons have another year of quite literally having to hold down that entire line?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I wrote a secondary question about Autry, just in the sense that, definitely last year, but the year before at times as well, they, out of necessity, were having to shuffle him around. And he's one of those guys that they love because of his versatility. Sure. He can play hand in the dirt, inside, outside, stand-up linebacker, and they played him at all of those positions. Last year, he was not on the defensive front a lot because they didn't have guys to play that outside linebacker edge role available. This year, my question is, are they going to be able to or want to move him inside back to his natural position more? But that is an interesting question, whether or not he kind of finds that cliff at his age. My other questions were this. One is around Teair Tart. There was a lot made about, and we talked to his coach and Teair himself at OTAs about how he's trying to take that next step. Obviously, he's one of the best nose tackle run stuffers in the league. And that's what the Titans love to have him for. He's been a 2-down guy as their designated nose tackle. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show the other day, and they were talking about lessons learned from the best defenses in 2023. And it was Nate Tice, and it was I'm blanking on the host's name over there. Apologies to him. I'm totally blanking on his name. Either way, they were talking about how every team has to have, it feels like in today's NFL, a million, as many edge rushing guys as you can possibly have, or just guys that can get after the quarterback from the inside or outside. But every team still has to have at least one nose tackle. You got to have one guy that is your go-to run stuffing first and second down guy. And that's what Teair Tart has been for this team. And they love him in that capacity. But he is interested in taking that next step and trying to hone his pass rushing skill. Robert Mays, by the way, just kidding me. Robert Mays, host of the Athletic Football Show. Sorry, Robert. This is something that I kind of have some doubts, not to be a hater, and I'd love for him to prove me wrong, but I kind of don't see him, just his body type, his game, being a big element in the pass rush. Yeah. I think he's always going to be primarily that run stuffer, which again, you need on your team, and he plays that role so well. But my biggest question is, does he take that next step? Is he able to take that next step? What do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you bringing up Tier Tart specifically, I remember, I think it was mini camp or maybe it was OTAs, but Mike Vrabel making a specific comment about, guys not practicing maybe as hard as a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who goes hard every single day. And then that day, Tier Tart's not out there, right? And all the tender stuff, he waited till he signed his tender. I think
last guy in the entire league to sign his tender.
I mean, yeah, right. We're like, okay, what's happening? I don't think another team would try to get him, but technically they can. And how is he practicing?
Right.
I mean, there were so many questions. I think, what you bring up, Easton, it's an interesting point, because I guess in my head, I see what he did last year, and I see that as, a close to his ceiling. I mean, maybe he can do a little bit
I'm
more
with you. Yeah.
But, he's not and I know they're different positions, but he's not a guy you look at in the defensive front and be like, oh, it's Jeffrey Simmons. I get it. They're different players, but you know what I mean? When you look at them next to each other, it's just different, right? Like where they went in the draft. And when you talk about potential, and Tier Tart had a fantastic year last year, and
he's fantastic at what he does.
He took over a lot of production, when guys were hurt, and really helped Jeffrey Simmons up there. But, I think to expect all that he did last year, I mean, might be I don't think that you can expect consistency from the production he had last year.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's
fair to say.
Yeah. In the run game, I do think he can continue to be that stalwart nose tackle that you need on the first and second down of every drive, every series. But I'm with you that I'm not sure he's going to take that next step as a rusher.
Well, and I'm not worried about, the run.
That's the thing. He doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
They don't need him to. He wants to, because if he's able to do that, and like if he goes out and has even a 6 or 7 sack season, which for reference, he'd never had a sack in the league until last season. Last year, career high 1.5 sacks. So that's not his game.
That's my point in saying, and I understand sacks aren't everything. That's my point in saying too, that, he had a career year for himself last year. Now show me that you can build on something like that. Do you take a step back?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, do you take a step back, or can you show that, last year wasn't a fluke. Last year wasn't an outlier. I can continue the same production this year as well.
Yep. No, I think that wraps it up perfectly. Let's move to the outside, the edge position, outside linebacker edge. People, it's confusing. Pass rushers that are not big fellas inside, to clarify for those at home, right? We're talking about Harold Landry. We're talking about Arden Key. We're talking about Rashad Weaver. What is your biggest question, Michelle, about this group heading into 2023?
Can Arden Key be a true starter at this position?
Love it.
We talked about Arden Key. He was in division with Jacksonville, but Jacksonville had, put a little bit more stock in some of their defensive guys that they had drafted over the years. He is a guy who, as soon as he got signed to this roster, and I think Mike Vrabel attested to it in one of his press conferences, saying, we're lucky we found guys who really fit in with this culture, right? A guy like Arden Key, Azeez Al-Shaair, they fit into this locker room and the grittiness of this team. And, talking to Jeffrey Simmons during camp, he was saying, usually Danico and I compete with each other of getting sacks in camps and things like that. Now, Arden and I got a competition going on. And I look at that position, and I look at what David Long has done for it these last couple of years. And listen, Mike Vrabel, he has some spidey sense of knowing when some guy will continue to get injured, because David Long got injured early in, and I don't think it was anything serious, but tweak something in OTAs or mini camp that came out of Miami. And I'm like, whoo, because I was a big fan of re-signing him, because I thought that he was everything that was a Tennessee Titan. But, the injuries, can't have him. When he was on the field, he was great, but your best ability is your availability. And, Arden Key now has the opportunity to be a starter and really make a name for himself in the NFL. And I think that he showed that, not so much on the field, because we haven't been able to see much, of course. During minicamp, they can't sack the quarterback or really do much. But just
It's always tough when
everything-
people ask you
Yeah.
about defenders in spring. It's like,
Yeah.
what do they look like? Well, they're not wearing pads and they're
Well,
pretending.
he's huge.
Well,
he's a lot bigger
I
than
don't
I
know.
thought.
Yeah, right.
He's bigger than a David Long. And just his energy and the way he carries himself and the way he leads on defense, only being on this team, a couple months. And
He's
and
a
I
big
think
vibes guy.
like
You gotta love
Mike,
him in the locker room.
Mike Vrabel said that, when they're practicing against each other, he was like, Andre Dillard can learn a lot from Arden Key. He's like, because even though we're going against our defense, every day in training camp, and things start to get, similar, you start to understand certain things. He's like, Arden can show Andre about 7 or 8 different moves during a practice, and that can help each of them get better. And I think whenever Mike Vrabel specifically brings up a player, not when he's asked, and specifically a defensive player, just because we know Vrabel is a defense guy, I think that's really, really important. So can Arden Key show that he's a true starter in the NFL?
No, I love it. I came up with 3 questions that ultimately wrap up into one. Here were the questions I wrote down. First one was, do we still see a rocky start for Harold Landry despite his injury timeline?
Yes.
Number 2, does Rashad Weaver have another gear? And number 3, does Arden Key become the alpha? And all of those questions are ultimately the big picture question of what does the pecking order for this group shake out as in 2023? The reason why I think that people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Harold Landry's going to come back. He's going to be the alpha. Let's start there, right? So with Harold Landry, the injury timeline is as advantageous as it possibly could be for an ACL injury. Going down in training camp last year, he's now going to have, by week 1, I think, a full 13 months of recovery, which is well ahead of these advanced injury statistics. You look at like where guys are in terms of returning to full form. For I believe the number for edge rushers, which is tough because and JT, I think you were telling me that you heard from somebody that they're in. This sounds right. There may be no worse position for an ACL tear in the league than edge rusher, just because of how much bend and torque you have to put into your body,
it makes sense.
Yeah. It's one of those things that with edge rushers, I think it's like 9-ish months for them to return to be a plus player, and then something like a year to be back to their full selves. So all of that being said, people have a lot of reason for optimism for him maybe not having that Taylor Lewan, Bud Dupree style first 9-ish weeks, really struggling to get back on the horse. And then the end of the year, they finish strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's reason to believe that that's the case, but people are going from we're expecting nothing the first 10 weeks of you as you get back to we're expecting you to be awesome week 1. That's a bit of a leap for me. I think maybe it's more like the first month is rough for him and then he gets back on the horse. But I really am not week 1 in New Orleans expecting him to be Harold Landry of 2020, 2021. And that's the reason why I kind of think that the alpha edge rusher title is up for grabs, at least right now in 2023 for this team. That leaves Rashad Weaver and Arden Key as the 2 contestants. And with Rashad Weaver, we saw, I think, it wasn't a great year. It wasn't a bad year for him last year. He did well in relief. Like he was adequate. He was an adequate player.
I think of that Chiefs game.
Yeah. There were some ups and downs. And listen, he was put in a position that the team didn't want to put him into. They had to put him into. So it's hard for me to really hold that against him. But now this is the year, I think, if you go back to him as a rookie, like what the timeline was, this is the year where it's like, all right, time to start pulling your weight around here. Time to start being that guy. Let's see if you're that guy. Last season, he goes and gets 5.5 sacks, which again, sacks are not everything, but just to not list out every stat. Arden Key, for reference, for comparison, his season high in San Francisco in 2021, 6.5 sacks. Last year in Jacksonville, 4.5 sacks. So they're both kind of right in that 4, 5, 6 sack range. And the pressures are relatively similar as well. That being said, I kind of am questioning whether, based on what we saw last year, and maybe I'll pose this question to you, Michelle, do you think Rashad has another gear, or do you think he's going to be that B or C pass rusher on your team that's nice, but you want him to be a rotation guy,
Yeah, I think it's hard too, because last year really was his rookie year, because his rookie year, he was injured. So you look at last year, it was his rookie year. He had to be a starter because Harold Landry was injured. He had to take a lot more on. I think he had a fine year. I think it was.
Fine. Totally
when you look at him coming off an injury, like I said, was a rookie in his sophomore season, but it really was his rookie season last year. I think that he exceeded it.
There were a lot of excuses available to him, and he was fine, right?
And he had a lot of moments, right? I mentioned the Chiefs game when Patrick Mahomes was able to get out of the pocket. You never want him to get out of the pocket because then the Chiefs go and win the game. Rashad Weaver, you look at that and he was wrong, right? I mean, I'm not here to say
learning the hard way. Yeah,
I'm never here to say they're playing in the NFL, but it was a mistake. He's
wrong.
Young, right? Exactly. Yeah. So maybe he can be a starter. I don't look at him and I think, he is, our number one pass rusher on this team right now. I look at the job. If Harold Landry comes back fully healthy, that's great. That's amazing. I mean, awesome. What is the likelihood he does? It's an ACL. Medical has come a long way. He does play the pass rusher position. It's not a wide receiver. These are bigger guys. They have more weight.
Even
on
if he's
knees.
Perfect medically, you know what he's not done in a year? Played football,
right? And I mean, he was coming off his best, 11 sacks. He gets the huge contract. I mean, you cannot expect that this year. You cannot expect, 11 sacks from a guy. If he does that, great, fabulous, even better. But I think if you're setting your expectations for it, it's not fair to expect that. I think for Rashad Weaver, this really only being his sophomore year, if he takes a huge jump, I think maybe he could be the starter. But right now I look at it like Arden Key, based off his experience, the way he is around the guys, the comments from the coaches, I view Arden Key as the top guy until Harold Landry comes back and proves us wrong.
Yeah, I feel like we've reached a consensus on that. I think it is Arden Key is the 1A, and then the 1B is whichever of Landry or Weaver steps up. And maybe, at least to start, those two are kind of the 2A, 2B to Arden Key's 1. Let's look at the linebacker position, the inside linebacker position. Maybe the most concerning position group on the defense for this team. I would wager it's linebacker or safety for a number of reasons each, but depth being the common thread. What is your biggest question, Michelle, for the inside linebacker position for the Tennessee Titans in 2023?
I feel like every position I pick one specific player and I'm like, what are they?
Really? Sure.
I feel like at every position, there is one guy who genuinely he could be a starter or he could be a what the heck
range
happened.
Of outcomes for half of this roster is so wide. Yeah.
I think it's who is and what is Monty Rice. I mean, he's a guy in 2021. He was a third round pick. He's from Georgia. So that's always a plus, a guy coming from there. But I mean, he's had 4 starts.
Don't say always.
He's played in
Isaiah Wilson exists. Don't say always.
I know. Yeah, that's going to haunt me
Georgia
someday.
Defense.
Yeah, there you go. Defense. That's going to haunt me someday. But the sample size is still very, very small for him. And I think looking at that position and how thin it is, he's going to need to come in only starting 4 NFL games. He is going to need to come in, him, Azeez. They're going to need to be able to come in. I think I feel a little bit more confident in Azeez. But the biggest question for that group is, can Monty Rice have a significant presence on the field?
Dare I say it has to work? I kind of think it has to some extent.
I mean, it does. And that's why it's my biggest question. I mean, we're looking at this position group. You don't address
it's Monty Rice, Azeez Al-Shaair, and then
yeah, I mean, you don't address any defensive player in the draft. It's all on the offensive side of things. You can look at pretty much every single position group on defense and look at the depth and go, oh, you better hope there's not any significant injuries, because I'm even looking at the linebackers.
Don't worry about it.
I'm even looking at, outside linebackers, what we were just talking about. Arden Key, Harold Landry, Rashad. Okay. Who's after that? You don't know those names.
Sam O, come on down.
Oh yeah. Now you look at inside linebacker, and I can not even confidently say Monty Rice, just because the sample size is so small. Right. And Azeez Al-Shaair is new to this team. But I will say, above all, I feel confident that Mike Vrabel and Shane Bowen can plug and play people off the street into this defense.
Well, we've seen him do it.
Yeah, and that's why I have confidence, even though I believe that Monty Rice has to work out.
Well, and if you gave me a defense and said you have to pick one area to be a weakness, I might choose inside linebacker. Not to diminish their importance, and a good team, a good offense can literally win the game by exploiting your inability to turn and cover a slot wide receiver or a tight end. Jacksonville with Evan Ingram, for example, last year, we saw him absolutely annihilate the Titans in that one game. And it's like, well, because there's no but Dr. Gibby's trying to turn and cover him. Jack Gibbons it ain't going to work. It's not going to happen. That was my two questions were Aziz Al-Shaair. I wrote, is Aziz Al-Shaair enough? And does Monty Rice finally pan out? Because that's really all you're cooking with in that kitchen. I really don't have a whole lot else to say besides I am confident that Al-Shaair is going to be good. I do question, and you mentioned David Long earlier. The thing about David Long that made him so not just instrumental to this team's success, but as somebody watching this team, he was kind of a breath of fresh air back there, was the fact that he was kind of the only inside linebacker that you could reliably trust to turn and cover and not just drop into zone. Like he could hang with some guys he was versatile in that way. He was a coverage linebacker as well as a threat in the run game and rushing. With Al-Shaair and Monty Rice, who I both think have high upside, I don't really know who's doing that.
David Long was chirping in Travis Kelce's ear and getting him frazzled all game long. I mean, he wasn't only an undersized presence, but it's just something that you hope Aziz Al-Shaair can, keep up the production. I understand, David Long Jr. wasn't available, but it comes down to, honestly, just a big question mark. It really does. And I hate to not have an answer for it, but it kind of just is, what do these guys become and what can they do on Sundays?
Yeah, no, I agree. Before we get to cornerback, which is more convoluted, let's touch on safety real quick. What was your number one question, Michelle, for the Titans safety group going into 2023?
Is Kevin Byard still mad? No, I'm kidding.
Hey, man, we good? We good, Kevin? Is that the question? Right.
Yeah, right. Oh, I'm just happy we can finally, hopefully, put that to bed. My question, I don't even know. My question is, will we see Elijah Molden be a factor,
that was my question
another piece into the safety group? I mean, 2021, he was a rookie. He had some rookie moments that year, but he did have some other rookie moments where it made you know the name Elijah Molden. And then last year he spoke about it when he talked to us just a couple weeks ago at OTAs, how he struggled with the groin issue and he figured out how to work on it. But I thought one of the most telling things from him was that he was getting some reps at the safety position. And, with all of the injuries they had in the secondary last year, being able to have a guy like Elijah Molden who can be versatile, just like Amani Hooker. I mean, you're not going to have Kevin Byard on your team forever. He's hasn't shown that he's slowed down at all, and he's been one of the best safeties. I mean, I think since 2015, he's like third in the NFL for interceptions, like 27 interceptions. But the reality is, I mean, he is getting older. He's got about a year left on his contract. And you're going to need to find younger guys who can also play that position. So mine is going to be, not so much of, what this safety group looks like, but how does Elijah Molden specifically look playing the safety position, and how much do we see of that this year?
No, that was my question too. I wrote, is Elijah Molden this position's saving grace in terms of depth? And that's really the biggest question, because this is another position group where it's all right. You've got Elijah Molden. You've got Kevin Byard, you've got Amani Hooker, and then it's deck chairs and lawn furniture, man. It's a bunch of dudes you do not want to see in the field. And we group Elijah Molden in there simply because we've seen him at that position sparingly in practice. We've seen them want to move him there. This past spring, they did it a decent amount. Part of that was because Kevin Byard was gone. They needed somebody to play safety out there. Will they use him out there? I'll be shocked if they don't, because I don't know who else they're going to use. They got to have somebody else. And if one of those two guys goes down, God forbid, You're missing Byard, you're missing Hooker. You've got to have somebody else. So I agree.
Well, and both of those guys, not Kevin Byard, but because he's never injured, knock on wood. But Elijah Molden and Amani Hooker. I mean, obviously Elijah was out all last season, and Amani had a couple issues going on last year. So
yeah,
you can't rely on Kevin Byard's healthiness.
No, you're going to take it for granted, and it's going to screw you 100%. Let's look at the cornerback position to wrap up the defensive side of the ball. Michelle, what's your biggest question for the cornerbacks going into 2023?
Christian Fulton. I said this at OTAs. Everybody's talking about Kevin Byard. I'm like, no, guys. Where is Christian Fulton? That's what I kept saying. Everybody's like, Kevin Byard. Yep, JT, you're on the same page.
Yeah,
he was on. I was this show's Kristen Fulton watch.
Okay,
every single week.
You were.
He's still not here, guys.
I was like, everybody's talking about Kevin Byard. He's not here. Contract, blah blah blah. I'm like, it's gonna be fine. It's all gonna work out. Like, I still think everything is fine. People get in their feelings. Contracts,
this year,
whatever.
This year, it's fine. Beyond that, I have.
Beyond that. Nobody knows. I don't even know what this team's going to look like this time next year. But Christian Fulton, man, why were you not at OTAs? Why at minicamp you're on a bike and then you
doing his own thing, baby? That's what he said. Just doing my own thing.
Oh, that's just so concerning to me. That's very concerning. I mean, not even so much a question. I'm just very concerned, right? I mean, you draft this guy in 2020. I think
2019.
Well, 19. Yep, because he was second round pick.
Part of that
doesn't have a fifth year option.
The good draft class, right?
Yes, doesn't have a fifth year option. Had a somewhat promising year in 2021. You thought, okay, can he be this number one corner for this team? Then you expect last year him to take a step up. Every week, it's like, is he questionable? Is he on the field? Not every week, but you know what I'm saying.
He becomes part of that doghouse soft tissue area for Mike Vrabel.
Well, and that is the concerning thing. And then when Mike Vrabel, you see what happened with David Long Jr., and he paired them together. Now, Christian Fulton is in his contract year. That's really concerning. I know it's easy to look at people in their contract years and think, oh, they're going to perform out of their mind. Well, I'm going to tell you this. I think that they might already have their mind made up on Christian Fulton just based off of the decisions that he made. And that is not me reporting. That is just knowing, okay, he didn't come to OTAs. Mike Vrabel had a big old nope, he's not here, called him out. We saw what happened with David Long Jr. If he doesn't have a ball out year, I don't know if he'll be on this team, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wrote that down as well. Yeah, this next year, I said, does Christian Fulton, this contract year, Christian Fulton, give this team something to think about? Because I kind of am already of the mind, like you said, I think that they're already moving on from him next year, barring him truly showing them something they cannot ignore this year. And the other thing that I wrote down, and I think is an interesting conversation we can briefly have, who draws the short straw in this group? Looking at this cornerback position for the Titans, you've got Christian Fulton, you've got Sean Murphy-Bunting, who you added from Tampa Bay. You have Roger McCreary, and you have Elijah Molden. We've already talked about how we think Molden may be more of that flex to safety cornerback. Maybe we'll play him as a nickel safety. We'll play him as a slot cornerback. We'll just kind of mix and match based on the week. But those four guys can't all be on the field at the same time, and they're not all going to get the same usage rate that you may expect them to get. Somebody has to be on the bench for a lot of those snaps, a lot of those packages. Who do we think is going to be that guy? We saw it's kind of unfair on paper, but it's just the way that it works. We saw Roger McCreary last year be the only guy on the team that was, I mean, I guess him and Kevin Byard, the only guys with stellar A+ injury report cards. He played, I think, like 99.7% of the Titans' defensive snaps.
Insane.
He was in there all the time. And yet, I kind of wonder if he's going to be the odd man out when you add Murphy-Bunting. And who do you think is going to be on the sideline more than you might expect?
And this might be a hot take. I think it'll be Elijah Molden.
Okay.
I mean,
so you think he may just,
I think part of the reason they're taking him also to learn safety is because, I mean, you can't deny what Roger McCreary did last year. I understand he had some major rookie moments, but he also had some moments of plays that I've never seen happen in an NFL game where he was like out of bounds and in midair threw it to
yeah.
And was it Andrew Adams maybe? Or I forget who was
I think it was Andrew Adams. Yeah, I think it was Andrew Adams.
And Shane Bowen has just, I mean, he's said, we love having Roger because he can play every position back there. He's so versatile. When we talk about these versatile players, these Tennessee Titans players, I look at them also exploring options of Elijah Molden being somebody who can also play safety. You get Murphy Bunting. And the reality is, if Christian Fulton is healthy, he's going to be out there because he is your best option. So I don't think that Roger I think Roger's out there. I think that he's earned the right to be out there. I think that Elijah Molden, him being out the entire year, coming back in, learning the safety position, I could see him being more of a rotational piece.
Yeah, I'm with you that it's going to be Molden or it's going to be McCreary. I just don't know which one yet, but I do think that that's what it's ultimately going to be. All right, last little addendum here. I didn't want to get out of this conversation before talking about the kicking and punting group on special teams. Did you have a question for the specialists for this year in 2023? What's your biggest question? I mean, it may just be who's the kicker?
Who's the kicker and who's the returner?
Yeah, okay. Who's the kicker? Yeah. Fair. Good question.
You talk about special teams as a whole. I think you can feel. Is Ryan Stonehouse going to be the kicker? I mean, the guy's got a leg on him. I'm kidding.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
I mean, you can feel confident in the punting game with Stonehouse. Everybody talks about he needs to have a little bit of better hang time, but the guy's cleats are already in cannon, and he was a rookie last year, so I think you can feel confident about him. Kyle Phillips,
everywhere else.
Returner? Question mark. Is Kyle Phillips your returner?
Maybe.
I mean, listen, if he gains the confidence back, I think what we saw from him last year, it was, he muffed the punt and then the confidence is down. And then it was kind of just like a ripple effect. And then he gets injured.
Yep.
I think that you will see, they drafted him in the 6th round last year so he could be a receiver and he could be a returner. I mean, Mike Grable said that. I mean, that is why we drafted him, because he's able to help on special teams in that way. So I think that, they will try to have him as like first priority. I mean, I talked about Hassan Haskins on special teams. That's probably not happening if he's on the team. I mean, who even knows? And then kicker. I think that's probably the biggest one. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago. This team is not a team scoring upwards of 24 points a game. So if you can get those field goals, get those extra points, that is gravy. This team needs that. Absolutely needs that, because this is not a team hitting the over in many games. So, I mean, we saw last year just how many one-score losses or games that came down to a kick and they either missed it or made it. I mean, you got to feel confident in somebody. I don't know if I feel confident in Shudak. He's still young. I know he's got a big leg. I know he was successful in college. He has a very, very small sample size in the NFL.
Wolf production here.
Oh, you are a Trey Wolf.
We're big on Trey Wolf, the rookie.
Okay, so you're out on Shudak.
Yeah. Well, not out on Shudak, just in on Trey Wolf. Sorry, Caleb. But I mean, I think the potential is there, but I mean, I'm with you that it's going to be one of the two. I don't think they're going elsewhere to find somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I do not foresee them, signing a Bullock again. They're going to want too much money. No. I mean, even though it's only a couple mil, but I assume, it's either Shudak or Wolf, or maybe they keep one on the practice squad and they battle it out in training camp.
Right. No, I agree. That was my question as well, basically, is will either of them waver? And that's my question hinges on what we saw at OTAs. Both looked really good, but neither really took a step back. They were neck and neck. I kind of anticipate them staying that way as we get into training camp, but we'll have to see. All right, that concludes every position group. Michelle, that was fantastic. And of course, we went way over time, but you know what? Okay. It was good. It was good stuff. So it'd be all right. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate having you on and giving us some of your time.
I love coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the Titans headed to New Orleans week 1, so we're going to look to have you back then, and then maybe we'll have to revisit all these questions we asked as we get
Maybe by the
later
bye
on into the
week.
season. Maybe that's when we do it. We'll see how many questions we have answered by then. But it was a pleasure having you on. Fantastic stuff, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Easton, JT, always a pleasure. I think definitely week 1 in New Orleans. I will have to come back on, and by the bye week, I think we will have plenty of questions to answer. I mean, we could have people chanting for a Will Levis start. I mean, and I also went to Kentucky.
That's what I'm saying.
It all
Things
just
could change dramatically.
It all just lines up.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Michelle. She's fantastic. Like we mentioned, going to have her on at least a couple times this year. Looking forward to that. Before you go, real quick, just to let you know, we are still just Mondays and Fridays, but oh, baby, JT, we're getting close to being back to 3, 4, 8 days a week. Who knows? As much content as there is to fill.
Episodes a week.
An episode every hour of every day, all throughout the NFL season. We do have an episode this Friday coming up, and I think for the next, there's only 2 other teams we have to talk about. Our AFC South roundup of the offseason will continue this week. Not sure which team yet. I've got 2 experts for the Jaguars and for the Texans that I have earmarked that I am in communications with, and whoever responds to me first will be the first man up. So we'll either be talking about the Texans or the Jaguars on Friday. You'll have to tune in to find out. Either way, you're going to need to tune in, because if you're a good, intelligent Titans fan, you need to be able to intelligently and in an informed way hate these teams. And the only way to do that is to hear from the sources themselves. If you didn't hear a conversation with Zach Hicks last week, I mean, I'm surprised we managed to do such a good episode. I mean, no one wants to follow an episode like that because it was very strong as well, JT. Zach Hicks is awesome. He's an expert on the Indianapolis Colts. Our conversation with him last Friday was fantastic. So if you've not listened to that, go check that out. You're really going to like that episode. You're going to learn a lot from that episode. I can guarantee you that you're going to be a lot more informed on the ponies up north. This upcoming week, we'll do one of the Texans, the Jaguars. Then the other Texans or Jaguars expert we'll have on the following Friday. And then after that, we're on to OTAs. We're past OTAs. We're on to training camp, baby. It's training camp time.
The
end of July.
The cycle just
time is a flat circle.
It loops itself, and we're back to OTAs.
It does.
This is our hell. This is hell.
No, we're back to training camp and excited for that. Of course, we'll be out there and have plenty to report on for that. All right. All of the plugging to be done. Make sure you're subscribed in case you are not already subscribed wherever you get the good podcasts. That's where we're at. Got to subscribe, rate, review. We need to check. We'll check before Friday to see if we have any more ratings and reviews on there. But if you leave a 5-star rating and a review, we will read out whatever you have to say in the review. You can hate us. You can love us. You can plug your social media. Say what your Threads account is. If you want all 7 people over there to follow you, then throw that on there. We would love to shout you out. If you leave us a 5-star rating, that is very helpful for us in selling the show. So I would consider it a personal favor if you went and did that. Thank you very much. And then, of course, can't forget to mention, if you are looking to be degenerate gamblers this year, like JT and I are and pride ourselves in being, you got to check out Zen Sportsbook. It is the newest and, dare I say, most unique sportsbook in the state of Tennessee. They do some awesome work, and we are partnered with them. Stoked to be partnered with Zen Sports. They've got apps on the Google Store and on, of course, Apple, the App Store. Go and check out the Zen Sports app, download it, and when you sign up, use our code HOTPOD, HOTPOD, when you sign up to get a 5% cash back welcome bonus for your first 15 days. And then once that's up, 3% cash back bonus in perpetuity, forever. And JT, that's on your betting volume. So that's not on wins.
It is.
This is not funny money, $100 when you sign up.
I keep betting the Mets and they keep losing, but I'm getting that cash back, baby. That's all I care about.
That's right. 5% for your first 15 days of your betting volume, win or lose, you get back in your pocket. None of this funny money, $100 when you sign up, free bet that is actually not money you can access. You can't cash it out. You can do that over at Zen Sports. It's real cash. It's all real, and they're giving you money back, win or lose. So they're awesome. We love them. Code HOTPOD, HOTPOD, when you sign up Very helpful to us, but helpful to you because you're going to get some cash back in your pocket. All right, that's it for us today, JT. We'll be back on Friday talking Texans or Jaguars. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you Friday.